Okay, we're talking about bank loans are a fraud, number 2. So let's get going. Have a proper foundation for this video. You should have or have watched Bank Loans Are Fraud number 1, Bankster Thieves 1, 2, and 3, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1, 2, and 3, De facto Courts Were Under Martial Law Rule, Quasi-Contracts and Roman Civil Law, and Peace Officers and Law Enforcement Officers. As a foundational thing, the summary on the first video, essentially what the first video covered was about modern money mechanics and how under the bank's own document that was published by the Chicago Federal Reserve in the 50s, they do not loan money. Okay, this is a U.S. case, Tiernan versus Jackson, 1831, and they're talking about these other cases. The case Farmer versus Russell, so far as the point before us is concerned, asserts the principle that if A receives money from B to pay to C, it is money had and received for the use of the latter. In such a case, it is immaterial whether the promise to pay over be express or implied. For by the very act of receipt, the party holds it not for A, but for in trust for C. So, and these other cases, Harris versus Johns, Boss versus Pull, those sound like English court cases, English citations. I certainly couldn't find it in the U.S. Supreme Court or U.S. Supreme Court cases or the U.S. court cases like this 30 U.S. 50. That's Book 30 of the United States Reports, page 580. There's nothing that I could find in the U.S. reports, and so I suspect that those are English court cases. Anyways, this is another case, Crunk versus State Farm Fire and Casualty, and here they're comparing the difference between a cashier's check and a regular check. And they're both bills of exchange, and it goes, a cashier's check differs in that it is a bill of exchange drawn by the bank upon itself and is accepted by the act of issuance. The cashier's check is the primary obligation of the remitting bank. An ordinary check is considered merely a promise to pay, but a cashier's check is regarded substantially as money, which it represents. The gift of such a check is completed upon delivery of the check. And then they're quoting this other case, Hathaway versus Delaware County, Delaware County, in 1906, that by reason of the particular character of cashier's checks and the general use in the commercial world, they were to be regarded substantially as the money which they represented. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is if you think about it, a regular check, you can put a stop payment on it, but a cashier's check, they can't. And if you think about it, a Federal Reserve note is essentially the same thing as a cashier's check. It's issued by the bank, and it's considered money. This is actually a Canadian case, and this kind of goes into it a little bit more, and it also shows that it's the same in Canada. And the reason being is that it's all coming from England. Quote, what is said to be an unconditional promise to pay a certain sum of money is itself money. The words on the face of the paper money will pay to the bearer on demand cannot alter the character as money and turn it into a different document which calls for the payment of money. In other words, what they're saying is that just because it says we'll pay to the bearer on demand doesn't mean that it's not paid. Okay, it is money. And that phrase, will pay to the bearer on demand, means nothing. It's paid. And that's Bank of Canada versus Bank of Montreal, 1978. And that's Supreme Court of Canada, too, by the way. So these are all admiralty cases or on Roman law. Okay, that Tiernan versus Jackson is over a shipment of tobacco. Crunk versus State Farm Fire and Casualty, it's an insurance policy. That's clearly admiralty. Bank of Canada versus Bank of Montreal, again, that's all admiralty. The Tiernan case talks about it being a chosen action, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This Tiernan versus Jackson goes on to say there are either cases where there's an express promise to hold the money subject to the order of the principal, or there was an implied promise to pay it over. Okay, so this is all important because we're going to go into that a little bit more. The implied stuff, that's how they get you into jail, okay? They're literally selling people into jail. They're creating a debt and then selling people into jail, and that's exactly what it is. And the judge gets a royalty, and they're nothing but a bunch of Satanists. So it was an implied promise to pay it over as it was received to the use of the particular person. In the case of Bard, no such irresistible presumption exists. Okay, this is admiralty again. Civil law, Roman law. Okay, presumptions are taken in Roman law. Okay, they're not taken in common law. This is all Roman law. A chose is French, right? That's civil law. France is a civil law country. Thing with a tangible or intangible, a personal article, chosen action, a proprietary right in person, such as a debt owed by another person, a share in a joint stock company, or a claim for damages in tort. Okay, so this is all civil law. This is Roman law. This is what they're talking about here. This is Black's Law Dictionary, 8th edition. Civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law. Okay, so this is for government employees. That's what they're saying here. Every nation, commonwealth, or city has established for itself. Okay, that's government employees. That's what they're talking about there. Think about it, boys and girls. To distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. This is the same way these Satanists are selling people into jail. This is all based on the Satanic UN through the Unidroit Treaty and the Uniform Commercial Code. And the jails are all penitentiaries where you do penitence, okay? And so they're getting you to volunteer in and selling you into slavery under their satanic contracts. That's exactly what's going on, boys and girls. This is all Satanism. This is beautiful Satanism. This is Book of Revelation stuff that's talking about right now. This is Satanism coming in the flower and exposing itself for what it is. This is exactly all about Satanism. Bottom line is that banks do not loan anything. There are no bank loans. All bank loans are a fraud. All mortgages are a fraud. The so-called federal debt is a fraud. There is no government debt. All foreclosures are a fraud. The so-called subprime crisis was a fraud. See Bankster Thieves 1, 2, and 3. So then what does that say about taxes, boys and girls? They're extortion is what they are. The banksters are thieves. The U.S. Congress is bought and paid for by the bankster thieves. All so-called courts are bought and paid for by the bankster thieves. They operate exclusively under the Satanic Uniform Commercial Code. This is all coming from the United Nations through the unconstitutional Unidroit Treaty. Watch the Unidroit video, people. Bond versus United States. This is 2014, Supreme Court again. But Madison insisted that just because this power is given to Congress, it did not follow that the treaty power was absolute and unlimited. The President and the Senate lacked the power to dismember the empire. For example, because the exercise of the power must be consistent with the object of the delegation. The object of treaties, in Madison's often repeated formulation, is the regulation of intercourse with foreign nations and is external. So it's not meant to be internal. And so they have no authority to assault you with their Uniform Commercial Code, because that's exactly what they're doing. The Federal Reserve Bank was created in the middle of the night on Christmas Eve of 1913. The corporation located in the District of Columbia called United States went bankrupt on 9th of March 1933. It took less than 20 years for them to bankrupt the country. 9 months less, and I don't think that that's a coincidence either. There's a reason for that. I can't prove it, but there's nothing that happens by accident. This is the U.S. Congressional Record dated March 17, 1993. It's an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9, 1933, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. And then it talks about House Joint Resolution 192, joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolve the sovereign authority of the United States in the official capacities of all United States governmental officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. And here is U.S. Senate report, dated number 93-549, dated November 19, 1973. Since March 9, 1933, the United States has been a state of declared national emergency. Well, gee, isn't that interesting? The same time they go bankrupt, they go into a martial law. That's exactly what's happening. That's the whole plan, boys and girls. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the president may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and in a plethora of particular ways control the lives of all American citizens. The majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives under emergency rule. For 40 years, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have in varying degrees been abridged by laws brought into force by states of national emergency. Well, there's a reason for all of that, people, and we're going to go into that here in a minute. They've merged the United States with England, with Britain. That's exactly what's happened. The Federal Reserve Notes, or IOUs, as found in the Bankster Thieves 1 and 2 video. Anything purchased with Federal Reserve Notes is purchased on United States credit. If you buy something on United States credit or the credit of any other corporation, who owns it? United States owns it. If Federal Reserve Notes are bills of United States credit, how do they pay a debt to the United States? How? Think about it, people. How does a Federal Reserve Note, if it's a bill of credit, of United States credit, it's essentially a credit card, a credit card with United States credit on it. And so it's limited as to, like, this one's $20, okay? So you got $20 worth of United States credit. And so how does that pay a debt to United States? It's all extortion is what it is. This is Gold Reserve Act of 1934. As used in this act, the term United States means the government of the United States. The term currency of the United States means currency, which is legal tender in the United States, and includes United States notes and Federal Reserve notes. And that Gold Reserve Act of 1934. Mortgages are found in Roman law. Negotiable instrument law is a subset of Roman law. Federal Reserve notes, Bank of Canada notes, Bank of England notes are meant for internal use of the government only. By using a negotiable instrument to purchase things, the de facto courts presume you consent to their martial law rule, as found in the We Are Under Martial Law Rule video and the de facto courts video. Because you accept Federal Reserve notes, Bank of Canada notes, Bank of England notes as compensation for your labor, the de facto courts can presume that you're a government employee, as found in de facto courts video. They're all under martial law. The United States has not had a treasury since 1921. Look it up, people. The United States Department of the Treasury is now called the International Monetary Fund. The International Monetary Fund is a subsidiary of the World Bank. The Department of Homeland Security, the Border Pigs, and all its subsidiaries, okay, which includes TSA, FEMA, Customs, Immigration, etc. It's all a subsidiary of the Secret Service. The Secret Service is a subsidiary of the Treasury Department. That's what Bush did for us, people. Treasury Department's a subsidiary of the IMF. And the IRS is an agency of the IMF. Look it up, people. The United Nations, through the International Monetary Fund, issues Social Security numbers. The Department of the Treasury issues the SS5, not the Social Security Administration. The new SS5 forms do not state what or who publishes them, but earlier ones did. And all Social Security checks come directly from the IMF and the UN, and it says it on the front of the check. It says Department of the Treasury, okay, which is the IMF. And isn't it amazing how all of these terror alerts start coming out when there's a DHS funding bill before Congress? Isn't that just an amazing thing? It's just a magical thing how that happens. That's because if we can't rape you, the terrorists win. That's what these border pigs want to do. If you want to fly in an airplane, you get two choices. You get them feeling up your genitals, or you get to get irradiated. That's exactly what's going on. Love the TSA, the Body Cavity Explorer Corps. We're here for you. Think of us as your physician. Your health and safety is our concern. TSA cavity searches coming sooner than you think, because profiling would offend the terrorists. And then there's England and their crown pigs, the British United Nations. The Queen of England, Elizabeth the bitch, no disrespect to dogs intended, and her predecessors have been conspiring to reimpose their military dictatorship on America. Again, think about it. Watch my other YouTube videos. It talks about how in the causes and necessities for taking up arms in the Declaration of Independence, They were making war on us. That's exactly what they're doing, and they're still doing it to this day. This is taken from Congressional Record in Monday, August 19th, 1940. And this is a little bit closer up view of it. And this is the next page. And this is a little bit closer view of it. But I have the text right here. And let's go through what the text says. It says, Mr. Speaker, the information contained in this booklet is important at this time, particularly in view of the fact that the pro-English groups in the United States are now working in close cooperation with world internationalist organizations. Before 1917, foreign influence came mainly from Anglo-American groups. Since the World War, that's World War I, these groups have been fortified by the international financiers, that's bankster thieves, and the internationalists. Well, that's more bankster thieves or the so-called minority group. The pressure is therefore more than double, for combined these groups control all avenues of communication. That's news media people, and are now using them to further their plan for British domination to establish a world federation of states. Gee, that sounds like a United Nations. And that sounds like that it's a British owned and operated United Nations. That's exactly what's going on here. And this is, isn't it convenient? This is August 19th, 1940, and they went and did this UN Satanist charter in 1945. That's exactly what happened. It's only 5 years before. And it goes on. Let me call your attention to the fact that on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, which appears in our dollar bills, you will find the exact symbol of the British Israel World Federation movement. This symbol is also carried on literature and other organizations promoting a world government and a world religion. At the bottom of the circle surrounding the pyramid, you will find the wording Novus Ordo Seclorum. It was this new order that was advocated by Clinton Roosevelt several hundred years ago, recently in Philip Drew, and now followed by the executive. While he's talking about the President of the United States, people, and that sounds like some treason going on, people, and this was in 1940. And here it is. Okay, this is the back of the $1 bill, and I am guessing, I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but it sure looks to me like he's talking about this symbol right here, this seal, and where it talks about underneath the pyramid, it says Novus Ordo Seclorum, and they're talking about the New World Order. So this thing goes on. Do you not think, as good American people, that the administration has gone far from constitutional government when there's inscribed a symbol on the reverse of our Great Seal that advocates a new order? Yes, an order which means the destruction of our republic as formulated in the Constitution of the United States. Can we spell treason, people? Is this some treason going on? And it's right in the Congressional Record, people. It may also interest you to know that this contemplated union now, as advocated by Clarence Street, will be under control of Great Britain and is a movement to return the United States as a colony of the British Empire. Should we become a part of this union, our trading rights and liberties will be lost, and we will have no greater status than an English possession. This was the dream of Cecil Rhodes and Andrew Carnegie when the latter wrote his book, Triumphant Democracy, in 1893. Steps Towards a British Union, a World State and Internal Strife, Part 5. And this is taken from a U.S. Congressional Record dated Monday, August 19th, 1940. And so look it up, people, if you have any doubt. Don't take my word for it. There's some treason going on, and this is 1940. We are talking that it's 80 years later. You don't think anything's changed? And there we have George Bush Jr. and the bitch next to him, and George Bush's wife, and the guy on the left is Prince Philip, okay? And the one on the left is Prince Philip. He's the one that likes to call people like you and me useless eaters, okay? And wants to come back as a virus so he can eliminate a bunch of us. And, oh, by the way, she's the one that was convicted by the International Common Law Court of being involved in the Ninth Circle satanic cult, where they slit the throat of children and drink their blood. And it's not just a couple people that witnessed this. They had 40 eyewitnesses. So these are the kinds of people that we're dealing with here, people. And you don't think they're serious? Hello, people. It's time to wake up to what's going on, people. I want to point out, notice the smirk that George Bush has on his face there, like he's pulling something over on we the people. Yeah, this, again, he's in on it. And there's George Bush and the bitch in some meeting in the White House, maybe some state dinner or something. Anyways, notice she's wearing a crown, okay, and all of this is significant. When she visited Canada last time, she wore a red hat, and there's the bitch wearing a red hat. And so whether if she's wearing her crown, it's a state visit, it's official business, and when she's wearing her red hat, she's a tourist, basically. If you think about it, the War of Independence never did end. And I brought that issue up in the first case that I went to the Supreme Court. I mean, if you think about it, the Declaration of Independence is really just a list of grievances. And these are some of the grievances. And he is affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He's combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Gee, that sounds like color of law. For imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury. That sounds like their kangaroo courts they like to hold. For abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province and establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging the boundaries so as to render it once and fit an example, a fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies. Absolute rule is military dictatorship. He's abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. Well, that's exactly what's going on. Read the Trading with the Enemy Act, people, for protecting them by a mock trial. Yeah, that's a kangaroo court. And then, if you go further, you read the causes and necessities for taking up arms from 1775. There's, among other things, it says statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice-admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law instead thereof to publish and order the use and exercise of the law martial, okay? And for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter, we saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us. And so that's exactly what's going on. The War of Independence never ended. The Crown has been making war on us right from the beginning, and it continues to this day. Fraud is an intentional perversion of the truth for the purpose of inducing another into reliance upon it, to part with some valuable thing belonging to him or surrender a legal right. When one conveys a false impression by disclosure of some facts and the concealment of others, such concealment is an effect of false representation that is disclosed as the whole truth. Fraud and deceit may arise from silence where there is no duty to speak the truth, as well as from speaking an untruth. Ye are the father of the devil, and the lusts of your hearts ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he's a liar and he's the father of it. And that's found in the Bible. That is basically saying that these people, these liars, the Crown and their handlers and the Vatican, they're all satanic, okay, because they don't have the truth. They lie, they sneak around, they deceive. That's satanic, people. And in Revelations it says, but the fearful and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers, that sounds like pharmaceutical drug pushers, and the idolaters and liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Everything they do is a fraud and a lie. The so-called courts are full of fraud and lies. If you do not participate in their fraud and lies, they'll deny you justice. The whole financial system is a fraud and a lie. The only true loan happens when it's not involving a corporation. All corporations are a fraud and a lie. The Uniform Commercial Code is full of fraud and lies. I'm not afraid of Muslims. I'm not afraid of the Taliban. I'm not afraid of Al-Qaeda. I'm not afraid of Iraqis or Iranians. I'm afraid of psychopathic leaders and politician criminal warmongers. That's what I'm afraid of. We're addicted to war. That's exactly why the U.S. can't kick militarism. Central Banking 101, the root of modern civilization's insanity. First, we'll persuade humanity that paper has value. Then we'll convince them that there isn't enough paper. They'll forget the meaning of life and work as slaves to our paper, perpetually in debt to us from cradle to grave. Brilliant. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around, the banks will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people whom it properly belongs. And that's Thomas Jefferson. This is a clip art that I got that fits very well. So you got some thieves stealing, looks like a TV from a London electronics shop. And the bankster thieves are right next, it looks like a U.S. Federal Reserve, taking out wheelbarrows full of money and calling the thieves amateurs. And there's another one of the bankster thieves, Bernanke and Greenspan. And this is another one of the bankster thieves, partying. The American Revolution was fought primarily over King George III's Currency Act. The refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system, which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators, was probably the prime cause of the revolution. And that's Benjamin Franklin. And there's some more bankster thieves. Looks like Paulson on the right and Bernanke on the left. And you can see Obama there and Rockefeller. Looks like George Bush on the right in the back. And Greenspan, they're all in there, a bunch of them. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. Gee, that sounds like the United Nations and the British. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work and earn a living. They will be our chattel. We will hold the security interest over them forever by operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent forever to remain economic slaves through taxation secured by their pledges. That's Colonel Edward Mandell House in a private meeting with Woodrow Wilson. And it goes on. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us a profit. And they will be none the wiser, for not one man in a million could ever figure our plans. And if by accident one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. That's what you do, is you take away their plausible deniability, people. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us from any loss that may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any hope for their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation, gee, that sounds like Obama, to foment this plot against America. I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few free men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world, a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. And that's Wilson after he passed the Federal Reserve Act. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. And that's best yet. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forced to repay the cost of the war and was bankrupt. Hitler's crime was that he did not borrow money from the bankster thieves. He printed it, and as a result of the German economy was turned around in less than 3 years. Kennedy circulated $6 billion in U.S. Treasury notes, and Johnson's first act while on the plane to D.C. from Dallas after the murder was to recall those notes. And this is one of the notes. See, look at the top. It says United States note. The ink is in red ink. And yes, that's a U.S. Treasury note. Lincoln was killed because he circulated $400 million in U.S. Treasury notes. President Garfield was killed because he wanted to circulate U.S. Treasury notes. Under Gaddafi, Libya had debt-free currency, and they had him killed. Saddam Hussein was preparing to circulate a gold-backed debt-free currency until he was killed. Christ was killed 3 days after he threw the money changers out of the temple. The bankster thieves will stop at nothing to keep their power. There are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by sword and the other is by debt. The money powers prey upon the nation in times of peace and conspire against it in times of adversity. It is more despotic than monarchy, more insolent than autocracy, and more selfish than bureaucracy. It denounces as public enemies all who question its methods or throw light upon its crimes. As a result of the war, the corporations have been enthroned, an era of corruption in high places will follow, and the money powers of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until all wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic is destroyed. There's a fool born every minute. Are you one of them? Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. All bank loans are a fraud. There are no bank loans. There is no federal debt. All foreclosures by banks are a fraud. Not one penny of the so-called taxes goes to the government. Every penny of it goes to the bankster thieves. The U.S. Congress is bought and paid for by the banksters. The banksters with their bought and paid for Obama and their bought and paid for U.S. Congress are in the process of setting up a blood sacrifice to their satanic gods, and they will get the American Satanists to help them. And if you have any doubts about that, see Mark Passio's YouTube channel in his videos. He's a former Satanist priest, and he talks about the pillars of Satanism. And furthermore, what is more satanic than sending a bunch of people off to a field to kill each other? When injustice becomes law, then resistance becomes duty. Is there any wonder why Christ threw the banksters thieves out of his day out of the temple? Christ even called them thieves. So what can we do? We can refuse to participate in their de facto system. We can use any other money system but Federal Reserve notes or Bank of Canada notes or Bank of England notes. There are other alternatives available. We can use qualified endorsements and all checks and negotiable instruments. One of them is for deposit for credit on account or in exchange for non-redeemable Federal Reserve notes, or if in Canada it's Bank of Canada notes at face value. Or you can also redeem for lawful money under 12 United States Code Section 411. Another thing that people do on promissory notes is when you sign a promissory note, a friend of mine that actually provided that Canadian court case that is from Canada, he told me that what you're supposed to do is on the back of the promissory note is you put two diagonal lines from corner to corner, and in between them you write in non-negotiable, and that makes it so they can't sell it. So what you have to do is get your head out of your ass. That's exactly what you have to do, people. Get your head out of your ass. The more we do to you, the less you seem to believe we're doing it. We can work with our friends and neighbors to get the UN out of America and Canada and anywhere that wants to be free. The UN is a British tool. That's exactly what it is. So we need to understand exactly what it is. The UN is owned and operated by the bankster thieves and their Vatican handlers. We can educate ourselves about what a common law jury is and what the law of the land is. We can demand a common law jury of our peers, which is a trial by jury, not a trial with jury. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. Screw the UN. Don't forget to watch other videos talked about to get a proper understanding of what is happening and how it's happening. Upcoming videos: asserting sovereignty. Cosby, the judicial whore in Texas. Lowe, the judicial whore in Texas. Williams, the judicial whore in Texas. Fort Worth pigs. Kerrville pigs. Alberta sheriff pigs. National versus federal. Fake news. Yeah, there's lots of fake news out there. The prostitutes. Copies of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administrating-Your-Public-Servants. I have videos of private information shares that show these and other court citations that are available for donation. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept IOUs, Federal Reserve notes, PayPal guest checks, money orders, etc. Send me an email for particulars. Send me an email for other copies of documents to engineerwin@gmail and at Yahoo. I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you have a real nice day.